work, right?
Something like that should work.
Okay.
Okay.
Sweet. Better late than never, right? Let's go.
Do a little intro again. Okay, welcome back to SHARCOM 2021. I am your host, Crazy Tone Dog, and today we have Very Original 95 running ATV Off-Road Fury 3 ProNational Expert with the commentary of AKA Dude with an
Hello.
estimate of 1 hour, 5 minutes. I'll pass it on to you.
All right. So a lot of this game soundtrack is unfortunately has a lot of DMCA tracks in it, so you won't be hearing pretty much any sort of music throughout this run.
This truly is one of those games where you could just vibe to some music, sit back, and then enjoy yourself. But yeah, obviously, due to Twitch's copyright guidelines, you will not be hearing that music today, but you will get to see a pretty sick speed run.
Yeah, and I will say the soundtrack is really good.
Definitely, definitely.
All right, so resetting that and making sure I got the right tires on. 3, 2, 1, and begin.
Sweet. So the first track here is Wood Green. Obviously, the ProNational expert tracks are a little bit more difficult than the amateur national tracks. Obviously, the national tracks being the outdoor, more high speed tracks, where the supercross tracks would be like an indoor arena and they're a lot more tight with tighter corners and more jumps. But here we get going here on Wood Green.
So for the starts, you will see me ride up to the ramp and tap it a little bit. So I will get a boost backwards. But because I am on an emulator, I have to look backwards or else it will lag to about 80%. It'll lag to about 40 frames per second instead of the usual 60.
Yeah, and I've played this game both on emulator and console, and it runs pretty well on both actually. But occasionally, emulator does have some buggy entities within the game. Um, yeah, definitely when you go at the reverse at the start and hit the gate early, it gives you kind of more leeway on the start so that you don't hit the gate when you get going when you're trying to time the launch. And especially on expert mode, the ATVs that you're facing are a little bit faster. So if you don't get a good start, they could definitely get in your way into the first couple turns. So getting a good start is actually extremely important in expert runs. Already done lap one here. Solid lap one.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's the best by far. I think I've had maybe like a 105, maybe a 104 before.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Anything really in the low 1 minute range, especially in a run as long as this one, a championship run. Obviously, it's solid. Obviously, the first track you could
Cool.
afford to push a little bit harder, just because if you do mess up, you can just reset and it's the first track. So, but later in the run, you want to take a little bit less risks, I'd say.
Right, and so with these pronational tracks, you are going to be having a lot of little rhythm sections similar to Supercross, but then it also has just these bigger jumps to where you usually wouldn't see.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because national tracks, especially the amateur national tracks, it's just a lot of straight lines and a lot of high speed corners and bends, and it's kind of less jumps and rhythm sections. But pro national is a compromise between supercross and amateur national, where you kind of have to actually set up the ATV to have good high speed performance, whether that be through tuning your suspension or your gearing, but also be able to take some of the more technical sections at low speed. So it's a fine balance of just driving well and adapting to the conditions and also setting up your ATV.
Right, and some of the stuff that little bar to the left of my speedometer, you will see it's called a preload bar, yeah, preload bar. To
Yep.
where I flick the stick back and then back up to where I would get a lot of extra height. But we kind of want to stay on the ground as much as possible so that acceleration will stay up as high.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because sometimes using the preload to get more airtime in the end ends up you're able to skip a jump or two, which allows less airtime overall. So for the most part, you want to avoid airtime because it's slow. I know that's one of those things that applies for a lot of different speed games, racing games like this included. But yeah, airtime is slow, but if you can use the preload to your advantage to get more airtime in one spot to save yourself some airtime and momentum in another spot, it could be very advantageous. It just takes a lot of practice, trial and error to figure out where and when to do it.
And then you will also see that some of these jumps they have like a lower part to the left and the right, and then a higher part to the middle. Sometimes we use the middle, sometimes we use the left and right for less airtime.
Indeed, indeed. I could see now you're creeping into the lower 1 minute region, which is pretty solid at a track like this.
Yeah, 104. It's nothing to scoff at, but it's also not the best. Um, I think the best is like a 58 or a 59, if I remember correctly.
Um, I'm trying to remember. I think I really optimized this track for the fast lap. Obviously, you wouldn't be going for fast lap type strats in a full championship run. I think it's around like a 50, 57 around there. I think I forget now. But yeah, like regardless, anywhere in the 1 minutes. I mean, for the longest time, the fast lap here was a 1 minute 101 area. So to be doing this in a championship run where you can't afford to make any mistakes, especially on the spot, it's pretty impressive for sure. Another thing you're going to notice as well is in most of this game, you're going to spend a lot of time on the throttle. Pretty much all the time you want to spend on throttle because the ATVs are very agile and can go around most corners, especially the corners on the national tracks at full speed. But there's also ways that you can quickly lift off the throttle. If you check Original's A button there, the throttle button, you can see sometimes he lifts off the throttle, and that's to get the ATV to pivot, not so much to slow down, but ATV 3 has a kind of a weird physics engine where if you lift off the gas at really, really fast increments, it gives your ATV more grip as he comes across the line with the 103.73 for the final lap. Total time 5:24.06. Pretty damn solid. Pretty damn solid. I'm sure you've had better ones before, but it's a clean start. It's a clean start.
Yeah, I think I've had a 521 before, somewhere around there. But it is not too bad.
Yep.
All things considered.
Now on to Hampstead Peak. Now this is an interesting track because this is the first instance of running into alternate terrain. Now this is a track that primarily is rated for dirt tires, but there are mud spots on this track where if you go into the mud, you can lose a lot of traction and thereby lose a lot of your speed. So sometimes you'll actually see Original purposely go offline to avoid certain areas of the track so he doesn't lose his momentum. And I think this is one spot right here where you can see the darker dirt that's mud. You want to really avoid that because it will slow you down a lot.
And that was a really good turn.
Yes, it was. And I noticed you lifted off the throttle before that jump there at the top of the hill to avoid airtime. That's something I do here as well.
Yeah, for like bigger jumps to where like if you don't like just let off, it just loses it like a half a second to a second probably.
Especially jumps that lead directly right into corners. Obviously Original you would know there's some pain in the butt corners in this game where there's a jump right before them and you could very well overshoot them into oblivion if you're not careful. So lifting off the throttle and getting the tightest line around the corner right after a jump will save you a lot of momentum and a lot of time, obviously, taking the more optimal route.
Right, and you'll definitely see that on the last track, where there is a time to where you can just overshoot, very much so.
Mm-hmm. A general theme in ATV Offroad Fury 3 as well is usually the first track in the championship is the fastest lap. It's the quickest one. So here, the laps are going to be a little bit longer at Hampstead Peak. I would say like 115s are pretty solid, right? Like 116, 115 in a championship run is pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I would have to say. You're shooting for like a sub 120 first lap, and then from there on, you're shooting from about like 115s.
Yeah. And right here, you're going to go around the outside of the mud area because you really do lose a lot of speed by going in there with the dirt tires. Um, there's a few tracks in this game where making a tire selection and tire choice is actually quite difficult. Sometimes the track can be rated for mud or it can be rated for snow, but in reality, like the dirt tires will be better for the mud track, and then the ice tires will be better for the snow track. And that's just
Right.
something that you learn through trial and error, really. It's figuring out what configuration you want to run depending on the track, obviously.
And with Newton marshes in particular, um, you're pretty much going to optimally want to run mud, but since we're doing this more RTA, I don't want to waste like a minute, and so I'm just going to continue on with dirt tires.
Yeah, and dirt tires are slower, but also serviceable on marshes because there is on a lot of the track there is a line where there is dirt. Is just a
Right.
lot more narrow, and you have to be more careful to not spend too much time sliding around in the mud, making a mess. So yeah, this has been pretty good so far. A 15:06 lap two. That's actually, I would say, relative to the fast lap record here. That's actually a lot closer than at Wood Green. So you're certainly flying this run for sure. It seems to be. I think the fast lap here is like 111, 112 or something like that. So again, in a championship run, like this is, solid pace, keeping it on the road. And that's a big part of this game is, it might not be, obviously ATV speedrunning, for those of you who don't know, is somewhat in its infancy compared to other communities. I could remember a time about 3 years ago where there were me and one other person speedrunning the games on a consistent basis. So um, we are still trying to find different ways to optimize the game. With that being said, a lot of these runs come down to it's a battle of attrition, really. Like you really just want to keep it out of the barriers and keep your rider on the ATV. Obviously, Original doing a great job doing so, making it look easy. But trust me, if you've played this game before, God forbid if you touch anything, a lot of the time you'll just fall off your ATV. So you got to be extremely careful, and that will lose you a ton of time having to reset and gain all your
Right.
speed back.
You can literally hit almost anything on the track. You can hit one of those tires and fall off. You can hit one of those orange cones and fall off. And most famously of them all, you can hit those like foam thing
Right. Yep.
with the company on them.
Yep.
And
Yep. Yep.
sometimes if you're not going fast enough, you can also hurl yourself off of the orange fencing.
Right. Yep. That fencing is very hit and miss. I've gotten lucky with the fencing before, and sometimes I don't get so lucky with the fencing. I know I'm noticing one advantage to actually running the expert category is, maybe for a beginner, if you're just trying to pick up the game and have a good time and speed run it for the first time, expert mode is actually difficult because the AI are decently good at the game. Like if you're someone new to the game, the AI are actually going to be in the way if you're speedrunning expert. But the issue with normal mode AI, where they're much slower, driving slower ATVs, is you actually come up and lap them a lot of the time on normal mode. I'm not sure about the ProNational whether you lap them or not, but I know in many other categories you do. And believe me, even though the track looks extremely wide, with the AI ATVs, they're a little bit unpredictable, especially when you're around them. And whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and they'll turn in front of you, and you'll hit the back of them and crash or lose time. So that is one
Right.
good thing about running expert is you probably aren't going to come up to lap anybody this run. I imagine. So
No, but generally I keep a good lead on them because I'm used to this.
yep,
Um, but lapping them, it's pretty hard to. All right, so 6:20, 10.
that's solid, man. That's good.
Yeah, almost a 6:19, and that's really good for a championship. So this is Gecko Dunes that is coming up. So I'm having to change my tires from the dirt tires to the sand tires, or else you will have no grip. You will just lose a bunch of time. So it saves time RTA just to go ahead and swap the tires.
Yep. And a lot of the time when we do these runs on our speedrun.com leaderboards, We usually just time it in-game time. This kind of makes up for the discrepancy in loading times between the console and the emulator. And since we're a relatively small community, or at least we have been for the majority of our life as a speedrunning community, we want to have all the times on the same speedrun.com page. Splitting the emulator and console times would not be advantageous for us, given the fact that there's some categories don't have very many times submitted at all. So that's just something that we've decided to do, is rank times by in-game time as opposed to RTA, but we still do keep track of RTA, just in case if that kind of policy ever changes and we start ranking them by RTA, then we have those RTA times in the bank moving forward. So
Right. Like for this category, I'm pretty much the only runner of it. And the only difference between this and the normal mode is harder AI, which have a lot faster ATVs, and the last track is
yep,
also tacked on.
yep, they add one extra track. Sometimes I think two extra tracks. No, maybe I'm capping. I'm not sure.
No,
It's one extra track for expert mode on every single different type, whether it be amateur supercross, amateur national, pro supercross, pro national, doesn't matter.
I almost threw that corner a little bit too sharp.
Yeah, that can definitely happen there. I've done that quite a few times, for sure.
And so there are also like Olympics, to where it's randomized maps, but it's the same type of event, to where it's like it's either like a pro national or an amateur national or an enduro.
Yeah, yep. And enduro events, I forgot to mention those. They're a little bit different from these events. There's not a fixed path for for enduro events. You can basically traverse around. Obviously, Climax created these open world maps on top of the tracks that are in the game. Some of the tracks are within the open world map, and you can basically go around and find these gates and these checkpoints. And there is an optimal way to go kind of traverse your way through the environment to get to these gates. But many of these maps have been really, for a large part, unexplored as far as optimally trying to set times for them. So yeah, enduros are really cool. I enjoy doing them a lot. But yeah, the main kind of pièce de resistance on this game is definitely just the regular national and supercross tracks. I would say for the most part, that's where most of the runners compete, I would say.
Yeah, you almost see nothing with the freestyle or enduros.
Yeah, the freestyle events are cool too. Just obviously going off on a bit of a tangent here. This whole game kind of basically anything that you think you can do with an ATV. This game gives you an opportunity to do it. In this game, obviously, you're not going to see a lot of stunts being performed because it's all about speed. But there's a lot of different freestyle events where you can do certain combos and stunt combos and acquire points, and that's something entirely different. And I'm thinking maybe in the future more runners are going to get into doing that kind of thing. But yeah, for the time being, most of us are trying to optimize some of the main and more popular categories because that's where the competition is, obviously. So yeah, you've kind of flew through this track, Gecko Dunes. This is a interesting track because you do have to change your tires to the sand tires, and usually when you have to change your tires, the tracks become really technical because I guess Climax wanted to show off kind of the different terrains by adding technical sections on some of the mud tracks and the ice tracks. But Gecko Dunes is actually very, very fast. You spend most of your time in fifth gear and just flying down the straights off the big jumps and stuff. And it's a fun track for sure. It's the banked corners and different combos. So yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. There are also the end bits to where it's very curvy as well.
Yeah, it gets really, really tough there at the end. There's like some little whoops and then a really tight left-hander to end the track. So yeah, you're doing a great job. I think this would be a good time also to talk about your ATV selection, selecting the CT Racing ATV. Now, I know this thing has fantastic acceleration and wonderful brakes. Obviously, braking is not a huge part of ATV 3, but the
Right.
acceleration and the top speed is extremely good. I know the ATV is pretty agile too, especially over rough surfaces. So, yeah, you could explain your choice if you would like, why you chose the CT Racing over something maybe like, like the Patriot or the Fury or the my personal favorite, the Bomb Squad. I love the Bomb Squad, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Um, I chose CT mainly because it has very good speed to acceleration, the ratio.
yeah.
Because with something like Fury, you'll see a very high top speed, but very low acceleration. I think it has one of the lowest accelerations. Um, and we have like a
The Fury's interesting because the Fury has like a ridiculously long fourth gear, and sometimes
right.
you can really get stuck in the dog days of third and fourth on certain tracks. And the handling on the Fury as well is also a lot more sketchy and less predictable than the CT, in my opinion. Which it's a good bike to do fast laps with, but sometimes in championship runs, the CT can feel like a darling in comparison. So I definitely
Right.
respect the pick. I do respect the pick. The
Right.
knack is another good one too. The knack is solid.
Yeah, Nax Racing is also a very good one. Um, but yeah, the only downside about the CT also a 625/38.
I saw all 116s there. That's pretty good. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, almost a 115.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So we're going to change tires again back to dirt for Baja Sierra, although the name feels like it would have sand tires. It's dirt. Um, and this one is very interesting, as you will see. It's a lot different compared to the last ones that we've had.
Yeah, it's extremely, extremely twisty. I mean, I'm sure you can see the track map right there. It's very interesting. It's not quite like a supercross track, I would say, just because the straights are much longer than anything like what a supercross track would have.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
first
jump patterns are so particular. It's insane.
yeah. So it's taken me a while to get this down pat as far as the jump patterns are concerned, because that's probably one of the biggest things about these sorts of maps.
For sure. You lose a lot of momentum getting the jump patterns wrong. As you can see right here, sometimes the AI can get a good start and get in the way. Thankfully, you knocked him off his ATV instead of the other way around. That would have been quite a catastrophe, we'll say.
Yeah, and I wasn't meaning to absolutely target him, because it looks like I targeted him like a missile, but I just really you never really want to press the brakes in this game. You just kind of want to let off the gas if you ever want to turn. Um,
Exactly, yeah. As a quick increments, that's what I do. I learned in this
yeah,
game. You can get the ATV to pivot. It's like the physics function differently. If you're off the throttle than if you're on the throttle, like drastically differently, like not just a little differently. So you want to obviously lift off not too much because then you lose speed because you're not on the throttle anymore. But you want to lift off to get the ATV to pivot and get you online to set yourself up. A little bit of a struggle there going over that part, but you have
right,
enough
yeah.
speed to clear this so you don't lose too much time.
Yeah, I was stuck in third gear there for a second.
Oh god, third gear. And that's the other thing about this game for you racing fanatics out there. This game, you cannot select a manual transmission at all. There's no option to do that. Um, I like how you actually, before I continued, I like how you took a wide line there to get enough speed so you didn't have to preload for the next part. That was very nice. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's no manual transmission option, so the gearing sometimes will put you in the right gear and sometimes it won't. And generally speaking, the higher you want to be in fourth and fifth gear pretty much as possible in this game. Every ATV in this game, maybe except for the first few that you get at the beginning of the game, are like Torque Vader. You basically want to be in the highest gear possible at all times. And when you get into third, sometimes you get stuck in third, especially going uphill, and that will cost you a ridiculous amount of time. I think any runner, including original, we all been there in the dog days of third gear.
Yeah. And you will see after my first lap, that first jump, I will be taking it more to the right, because I've I've learned over some very good PV pace runs to where if you take it more on the left, you will just straight up just physics just screws you over to where how the track is built, it just stops you completely, pretty much.
Yeah, definitely taking it on the left side is good. Sometimes I try to go right in the middle in between and do like a half preload to where I kind of get propelled forward and I can make that jump, that one jump pattern. But it's a little bit more risky. I think the way you're taking it is actually quite good. Oh, geez. Oh, no, not the block.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
like I said, the foam block of death, it's out to get us all.
yep. And that's tough because there weren't too many foam blocks there, but you just had to land on the one that was right there, you know? You could have
Yeah.
recovered, but yeah, it's definitely a time loss, but I'm sure you'll be able to recover from it, obviously. So
Yeah, because these have been good laps so far. Like a 201 start is really good.
that is good. Yep, that is quite good.
Um, and falling, getting knocked off your ATV only costs about 3 seconds, I'd say, probably somewhere around there.
I think on a track like this, absolutely, it kind of depends, right? Because like if you're in like a crazy section on a supercross and you crash, and you're like stuck in the middle of those jumps in second gear and you can't go anywhere, you might lose more than 3 seconds.
Yeah,
But I
closer
would
to
say
like
on a typical crash costs you about 3.5 ish seconds, which isn't the end of the world in a run that's an hour long that we haven't fully optimized yet, but definitely want to avoid crashing at all costs. I would say it's better to drive safely and not crash versus be guaranteed to crash once or twice, but then drive super aggressively.
right.
Generally speaking, you want to go with the safe route in this game. Like I said, a lot of the time it just comes down to it's a battle of attrition. And there's a lot of subtleties that Original's doing to avoid airtime that uh, can't really be described necessarily just through watching it. Like you can't tell just by watching it, but essentially lifting off the gas right before jumps to avoid airtime. Other things like taking a wider line than would otherwise be accepted because it allows him to carry more momentum and more speed into a different jump pattern. Obviously, running these tracks a lot over the years, you start to learn subtleties about the track and things that you could sacrifice one area to make another area faster. Jump a little bit far again, but not too bad. You're fine
Yeah.
there. No crash this time.
Um, and with like letting go of the brake or just making a wider turn, it allows you to turn if you ever have to turn in midair, um, as well as kind of like this, to where it also doesn't just kill off all of your momentum.
Yep.
Like I
You
just
want
went
to.
from third to fourth right there.
Mm-hmm. And when you're cornering or when you're jumping and you're in the air and you're about to go through a corner when you land, you definitely want to take the time while you're in the air to get your ATV pointed as close to the apex of the corner as possible to preserve momentum, as Original said. Yeah, this lap looks pretty solid so far. Obviously, this being, I would say, the second longest track in the entire run behind the final track, which is Voya Desert,
Yeah, definitely.
which also sounds like a sand track, but it is requires tires this time, unlike Baja Sierra, obviously. But um, yeah, so far so good there. That's a 158, solid lap, sub 2 minutes. It's solid, and I'm sure you're at this point you're into kind of the momentum because this is a tough track, man. This is a very difficult track to optimize.
Oh yeah.
From the beginning jump section to the ending, it's tough. Yeah.
Honestly, the hardest part for me was the beginning jump section.
Yeah.
To master that down is a blessing.
Right. Yeah. Just to understand and comprehend it fully is a challenge within itself. But then on top of it, having to execute it every single time is yeah, quite difficult. That's one of the main. If I end up doing, I was planning on doing a ProNational normal mode run, and that I suppose is probably going to be the biggest run killer is this track. I would say.
Probably.
It's likely. Oh, and right there's a figure eight with the other ATVs. So the other ATVs, I don't know if you guys were able to catch that, but basically he just went over a bunch of the AI ATVs, and I've had it happen before on some of these tracks that have figure eight areas where you collide in the middle. It's unlikely, but it does happen. And yeah, if that were to happen in a speed run, I would probably get caught throwing my controller at something. Not sure what, but
Um, there is one map on 4 in particular on one of the ProNationals, where you will pretty much just about crash midair. It's literally just about almost luck if you crash or not.
yeah.
And that one's Kirsch Lake.
I mean, there's a few tracks like that in this game too. There's Baja Sierra. Beaver Dam is obviously the most notable one.
Oh yeah.
The track is literally just a figure eight.
Yeah, that was a bad start. I think this has probably had 5 seconds of time saved so far, to where I've lost. But
Yeah, I would
I
say
just
so.
came off of probably a 150, a mid 157, so that's a really good lap.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And that first section, you obviously messed up your strategy, but you recovered nicely. A lot of the time in these longer runs, you really have to improvise once things don't go exactly as planned, and not let one mistake snowball into multiple mistakes. I think that goes for any speed game, but especially this game because the
So
um, the penalties for making a mistake are quite harsh, you know. So
yeah, I would kind of say that for almost any racing game though,
yeah,
because you'll have a mistake just go snowball into many for a lot of racing games.
yeah. I do a lot of the sim racing on iRacing and Gran Turismo Sport, and that is very much a thing where you make a mistake and then you're trying to make up for lost time pushing too hard and it snowballs into another mistake and you just wonder why you even made the first mistake in the first place, and it's just a lot of emotions, you know, us gamers.
So yeah, I also usually have like gauges that I go by as far as like what is a good lap, what is a bad lap. Some of them I do have to adjust because I usually like sometimes I'll get better at a map. Um, this
Oh, that's an
ending
unlucky
though,
hop there.
2 minutes, so right at a 10 minute.
10-minute flat, not too bad. Nice and
Yeah.
simple. Luckily, you don't have to change your tires this time for the next track.
No, I'm deciding not to. It might bite me in the butt. Because it is a very much so a mud oriented map.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm about 30 seconds ahead right now.
There is a dirt line on this track, so all the menuing and the loading time that you would spend changing your tires, you won't make up that time in the race likely. Where if you didn't change to your sand tires at Gecko Dunes, you would have definitely lost a ridiculous amount of time. See, like this first part of the track is all dirt, so these dirt tires are actually optimal for these conditions. But then as you go later into the track, you're going to feel the ATV sliding all over the place, and
Right.
that's just due to the terrain being mud. Mud is usually you can usually tell it's mud versus dirt based on number one how it feels when you're driving, but also the color of um, the mud is a
Ground.
little bit darker than the typical dirt, like right here.
Yeah, and you'll start seeing me sliding a bit, me trying to take these little corners.
Yeah, and occasionally the drifting does look quite cool, but it is slow. Like you definitely lose a lot of momentum from sliding in this game, and that's the main reason. There is a power slide feature in this game that you can use around tight corners. For me, the only time I'll ever use it is when I'm on. Oh God, this fence of death! I hate that fence so much. I just had PTSD watching that fence come up on you there. But yeah, definitely in this game. Sometimes I'll use on the supercross tracks. I'll use in like a tight hairpin. I'll use the power slide to initiate the angle of the slide, and then I'll cancel it by lifting off the throttle. So it's almost like if you ever didn't play Call of Duty, there's a slide cancel. It's kind of the same thing in this game. In ATV, you could do a bit of a power slide and then cancel it. But you don't generally want to slide because you just lose a lot of momentum on the exited corners. And any racing game, really, you want to be slow in, fast out, get a good exit for the straights. So yeah,
Right.
sliding generally not good. Looks cool, not too fast.
Right. And with sliding, it's a loss of friction, which inevitably turns into a loss of speed and a loss of power from the engine. So yeah, like dude said, um, oof.
Yeah, that was definitely cutting it close there with the unforgiving hitboxes of some of the tires in this game. That was kind of close.
Yeah, that's kind of like a fastest lap little bit right there. I was just impromptu pulled off. Um, because I have seen, I don't remember who it was, but they were doing Sequoia Forest, and they intentionally smacked into the tires for the fastest lap record, and it that just like no, no, I just
Was it me? It could have been
it
me.
it might have been you. It was insane to watch though. Sub 120 second lap, not too bad. I aim for like 117, 118s. Those are really good.
Yeah, anything under 120 here, especially this late in the run on a track like this, where it's complete pain. Not just the mud, but obviously the jump patterns as well. Some tracks you'll go to, and you'll kind of pick them up quickly. You'll feel like you'll be nailing every jump pattern optimally. And then there's other tracks where it feels like you're out of sync the entire time. And for me, this is one of those tracks where it takes a lot of memorization to get the jump patterns correct because they just don't feel natural a lot of the time. You just spend a lot of time hoping that you get through it quickly, but obviously not feeling 100% confident.
Right, and with this jump pattern right here after that little bog, I've kind of impromptu changed that. And it seems to be a lot more consistent, a lot more faster for me.
Yeah,
To
it
where I
seems as
changed it
though.
to where I wasn't preloading off that first one to get as much height from that onto the third one, instead just going from that second one and not preloading at all.
Doing a good job managing the traction, obviously using a non-optimal tire compound. Over the muddy surfaces, especially at the end of this track, there tends to be more mud than dirt, and that's where you lose a lot of the time on the Maxxis Razor dirt tires. Um, yeah, generally this has been pretty good so far. I would say overall that was a very nice corner. You kept a lot of speed, got the jump pattern perfect. Wow, very nicely done. Um,
And
this has been
this
pretty
jump
damn
right
good.
here, you kind of want to avoid hitting that top, that first top that I hit, and you kind of want to just glaze over that little bit right there, so you'll keep your momentum going really well.
Yep. You don't want to jump too far, but you also don't want to jump not far enough, right? There's a penalty for both for sure.
Right.
And that's a weird one too, that jump that you were just talking about, because it looks like the jump is the same height left to right, but you'll definitely jump higher off the left side of it for some reason. There's jumps like that in this game where you think it's the exact same height, but then for some reason you jump higher on one side than the other. Um, I think it's as much just kind of. I think it's more of like kind of a product of the game developers not coding it properly, maybe, or it could just be maybe we perceive it to be the same height, but it's actually not. I don't know.
Um, it also could be just trying to save those very precious polygons, because this is from PS2 era. You were very much so trying to save as many polygons as you can for what you're trying to focus on.
Right, exactly.
Um, and so you saw in that first little section right there, I did kind of sneak too far down into that little bog bit to where I did get into the mud. Other than that, this has been a pretty good lap so far.
That's a tough preload right there. I remember that one. That's sometimes off these smaller jumps, you really want to preload to avoid airtime further down the track, as I mentioned earlier. But some jumps are actually quite difficult to preload off of. Obviously, preloading being flicking the stick backwards and then forwards. You can control the amount of preload. If you look at the bar beside the speedometer, you could see how much preload you use when the bar lights up in orange red color. You know the user is preloaded, and the amount you preload is based on how far you flick the stick forward once you flick it back, and at what kind of speed you flick it forward. See, that was like about 80% there, and that will control how much extra airtime you get. See, that was a smaller preload. and that's a big part of this game. And sometimes there's jumps that are extremely, oh wow.
Yeah, the tire kind of stuck up on me.
Yep.
43.
Sometimes there's jumps where like the jump happens really quickly, but you need to preload often, and it's actually quite difficult to flick the stick back and then forward to get the optimal airtime. So, props. That was extremely fast. I would say anytime that you lost that Baja, you definitely were calm, cool, calculated there. And now we go to a snow track, everyone's favorite.
Yeah, because you also see a little bit of ice, but I've tried to use ice tires on this track, and it ends up, there's more snow than there is ice, to where it
Exactly.
doesn't.
And that's the thing too is so the game will give you a recommendation of which tire to use, whether it's snow or ice. And sometimes the ice tires will give you a 3-star rating, and the snow will give you a 5-star. But then what do you know? The ice tires are faster. Like I think at Glacier Resort, that's the case, where it's completely recommended for snow, but the ice is faster. There's some tracks where it's a little bit less obvious, like this one, for instance. Like you could run pretty close to the same times, I'd say, with snow and ice tires. But again, the snow tires on a championship run, especially, uh, it's more forgiving. You could afford to run offline a little bit more away from the ice, and you won't get completely screwed. So yeah, and then there's other tracks like Colonel's Peak, if I remember correctly, where again, it's a little bit more of a question whether you want to run the ice or the snow tires, but overall, I think the ice ones are a little better. But this track, I think you're right. I think snow is the correct way to go with this particular venue.
Right, because the only real ice part is this part right here, to where you're riding literally on a glacier
Yep.
that's fractured.
And this glacier can definitely screw you over. Especially when I was a kid, I remember I would hated this track because of this sector coming up here. You want to basically go right through the jumps again to avoid airtime. Right here, jump off to the side, avoid that jump, and then land. That's perfect. I mean, that was a line that I originally didn't have not gone correct. Even when I was running my fast lap runs like a year ago here, I was never able to get that line perfectly every time. It looks easier on the surface, but it's because you're coming around that tight hairpin. And when you get there after that tight hairpin, everything comes at you so quickly. You know what I mean? So.
Right. Um, and so the fast lap for this one is like a 1:45, which is insane.
Was that me
Um,
too? I think so.
I don't remember, but I usually try to shoot for low to mid 150s. Like that was a 152 first lap. That was
First
really
lap,
good.
yeah, that's really good first lap. Anything under a 150, even at a 150, is pretty damn good for a long track and a championship run. It's no less on snow. Man, the snow can be tough.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I find the Glacier Resort to be harder than this one. Honestly.
Yes, Glacier Resort is tough, not due to it being long like this one, but some of the corners near the beginning of Glacier Resort with the way like the track narrows up in the first sector, and then obviously that downhill left into a right where you catch air and there's logs on the side. I think you know the one I'm talking about.
Right.
If we ever end up coming back and doing an amateur national run, you'll get to see Glacier Resort in its fullest form, I suppose. Here's the section I was talking about. Hairpin, boom, you're confronted with a jump section. Go right through the middle of it. Very nicely done there. Tight window to get that jump section right. Go around. Minimize airtime. Look backwards at the beautiful work that you had just completed. That was fantastic, man.
Yeah, and albeit this is a 2003-04 game, you can, I mean, just like any game of this era, you can tell that the background was either hand drawn or it's just like a photo just taken, and it just kind of circles around you. But it still is a very nice background though. Like you
Yeah,
can tell that
obviously
they
you don't
put
have the
effort.
pixels that you had in some of the newer games, but you could tell the game's presentation had quite a bit of work go into it. It's definitely a very nice game, very pleasant game to play. Hasn't aged too poorly.
No, The only thing that is like really standard of that age as well is the fog.
Oh yeah, the fog. Yeah.
To where it covers up kind of almost unloaded bits.
Yeah, you're right. In the
Just to give that
distance,
memory.
yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like in the distance, yeah, they cover up the unloaded bits. And again, that's another polygon saving measure, obviously.
Right. But yeah, personally,
So
this is. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say right there, that was another good example of you maybe not taking the tightest line through that corner, but doing it by design to get more speed, so you can make that jump pattern without preloading. So that was, I just wanted to, that was a nice textbook play right there.
Right. And I want to say that this is the first Fury game that I ever played. I had this one for a while, and I still do have physical copies of 2 through 4. Um, and so this one is the one that really grew on me, and then 4.
I'm the
'Cause that's
same
the
way
one.
as you, exact
That's
same as you.
that's the ones that I had grew up with.
Hmm. I remember I had a demo disc. God, you remember those demo discs from way back in the day? I had a demo disc where I had ATV2, and you can drive 2 tracks. I think it was like Anaconda Run and like Sausalito or something, and you could just drive
Mm.
2 tracks. And that's what got me into ATV, was that demo disc. And then the first full game was ATV3 that I got, and that's the one I fell in love with and played a lot as a kid. And then I think around 2K18, I was playing the game casually, and I ended up seeing a speedrun video by New Metals, who was the only person speedrunning the game at the time. And this was actually the first game I ever speed ran. In my, is that an
Yeah.
adjective or yeah? Anyways, this is the first game I ever speed ran in my entire life, and it's really the only one I have. I speed run passively, and original is definitely on the grind more so than a lot of the community is, to be honest. So, props to him for putting this all together, getting ATV Off-Road Fury, the franchise, and also this game, which is our personal favorite, getting it into the limelight, even if just for an hour or so.
Yeah, I will say like we have like pretty much banned all of the MX ATV games, um, no matter pretty much just about how old they are, how new they are, and kind of gathered them up into one community. And so it is very nice how we have a very centralized community.
And it definitely adds to the competition as well, because you have people that grew up with other games, obviously. Like, I'm kind of an old fart compared to a lot of people now, being 24 years old. So I played some of the older ATV Off-Road Fury games, where a lot of some of the new people in the Discord that are a little younger played the MX versus ATV games that came after. And you do get some crossover. You get some of the MX guys coming to the old ATV games, and vice versa. You get some of the ATV guys go to the MX stuff, and it definitely adds to the competition of the games. Yeah, I mean, it makes it a lot more fun to compete for leaderboard, whether it be fastest lap or obviously these wonderful championship runs.
And fixing to head up on final lap, still very low 152s. I'm smacking at. Um,
Yeah, very nicely done. A good start to this lap too. Now this is normally where the normal mode run would. This is would be the final track, but because we are actually on expert mode today, we are going to get an additional track coming up right after this.
and it is the most frustrating of maps, I will admit.
Yeah, Woya Desert is one that I'm actually not as familiar with because I'm not used to running the expert mode runs, but it is going to be the longest track of the bunch. I think just over 2 minutes is around what the lap time will be at Woya, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I think my average is about 215.
Got it.
Um, somewhere around 215, 220. And my worst being like 230s.
Before we get there, though, this is a pretty good final lap. Again, consistent 152s all the way through. And this one I think is 51 pace at least, I imagine. Seems like
Oh,
you've made no notable errors. Oh yeah, and this
um,
part of the track here is funny. You just cut right through this. You cut right through. Usually when you cut the track, it gives you a warning to go back on track, and if you cut it a lot, they'll just reset you. But yeah, there's some spots where they miss it. I know at Tech Center, the Supercross track, you could just cut the crap, excuse my language, out of one of the corners, and completely blow through it and not actually take the corner. But
150. That was a bit of a low 154. Still got a 924.36.
that's good.
So if I were a pro national normal, it'd be a sub 40, almost a 43, which is really good.
Didn't New Metal say that you can submit expert runs the first 5 races of an expert run for a normal mode, and then like you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say?
I'm not
Like
sure. I haven't asked him yet. But if so, then I mean that's really good. And I'd actually let me compare that against my normal run real quick while this is loading. Yeah, that beats it by like 40 seconds.
there you go. Well, you can submit it if you want as a normal mode run, just for the first 5 races. But we got one track left to do here
Yep.
in the stream. I still find it impressive that you stayed looking backwards when you launched there. That would make me extremely nervous. I know it's obviously to save some frames, but that
Yeah,
is yeah.
it's more or less just so the start isn't delayed because when it lowers that FPS, it really does screw up um a lot.
Yep.
Um, and there's not even that big of a difference there, but I mean, it still is noticeable enough, especially in the beginning.
Gotcha. See, this is where I remember Boya Desert becomes a pain is when you get to the windmills. See
Yep,
those windmills? It
right.
usually means, yep, here
You
it
have
is.
these,
Part that I
yeah,
always
this
miss.
part, but then we have this little turn right here to where I can take it really sharp. Yells at me to go back on track. I go back on immediately.
Yeah, as long as you don't cut it too much, you won't get reset immediately. The worst feeling in the world is when you cut it and then you think you didn't cut it too much, but then it says go back 3, 2, 1, and then it resets you. I'm sure you know
Yeah.
the feeling, but oh
Um.
god, this part. Yep, here it
Yeah.
is.
And then you have pro to where like you'll go off track, you go back on, but then it tells you go back,
Right,
which is
right.
what I absolutely hate about that game because I've been getting to the terrible little PSP version of the fourth game in the series, which is different because the third one in the series, the PSP version of that is exactly the same.
Does it have different ATVs?
I think it's exactly the same if I remember
I
correctly.
thought it had some like weird ATVs that weren't in the ATV, like the PS2 version, but yeah, I mean, I have to do some research on that. It's interesting. But yeah,
Yeah,
you're saying 4 is different than 4 on console? 4 on PSP is different?
yeah. You have Blazing Trails, which is the third version, and then you have Pro, which is the fourth version. And Pro is a lot different from the fourth.
Yeah, you mentioned there's rally cars in that as well.
Yeah, yeah, there is, and if I get to play if backup gets good, um, then I will be able to show possibly where it would be at, maybe.
Gotcha, gotcha. See, this run here, this race is where my knowledge begins to start to falter a little bit. Obviously, I've played this game casually a bunch and I've raced this track enough times to kind of know it. But as far as optimal speedrun strats, I've never really tried to optimize this track, to be honest with you. Nor do I really want to, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah,
Oh
no,
yeah,
this so far it's been pretty damn good, especially the beginning part of lap 1 and 2.
yeah.
Pretty
Um,
damn good.
I've tried to change up a bit of where I preload to get a lot of air, uh, to change up rhythms to make it faster. Um, and so, as you saw in that second part, um, that second long part after the start, um, I actually jumped a lot higher instead, to where I wouldn't have to take that long bit at the end.
Gotcha.
And like this, I preload, and then I preload again to try to get
Very
over
nice.
that.
Oh, you just
Uh,
missed it. Just
barely
missed it.
bumped it, so I have to barely preload that. Still
Nice.
not too bad. This one you don't have to preload, but the next one that's where I kind of get bumped up is I forget to preload that one.
Wonder if you could hit that airplane or if it's just a
I
model.
I haven't yet. I try not to though.
There is an airplane on Beaver Dam that has hit ground. I wonder if there's one that's in the air. You could actually hit it.
If I had to take a wild guess, it probably does have collision.
Yeah, a lot of stuff in this game does, especially when you explore in the free roam maps. There's a lot of things that you would expect don't have collision that just do. Like the roofs of like certain supercross stadiums and just random stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. And for
Yeah,
those
like
free roam maps, like you could explore so much and they don't have invisible walls blocking everything, so there's a ton of glitches in this game. I actually have videos on ATV Off-Road Fury 3 glitches on my YouTube channel. So yeah, it's definitely
so
it's a
you'll see
fun
me
game.
preload that, and so instead of hitting that last jump and just jumping straight up, it's pretty much I just go past that.
That's a big time save because if you have to hit that last jump, that's right before a corner too. So that's it's a big pain. That was sick. The way you went around the low part of the jump, but then also kind of went high enough that you didn't have to preload and you nailed that corner. That's
Yeah,
pretty good.
and to where since I'm really the only runner of this category, I'm the only one that really runs this track, to where I've kind of had to play test it a lot, as far as what do I want to preload, what do I not want to, um,
Yeah, there's no laps on the leaderboard for reference. So you're just kind of going in blind, figuring it out.
right, um, and so you also have to figure out a lot of the rhythms by yourself. That was unfortunate. Kind of didn't get enough speed to and height to get that.
Made up for it here though. Very nice.
Yeah.
Do you run low gears on your CT or medium?
I don't know off the top of my head. I just kind of just use whatever is preset. So
Yeah,
probably medium.
yeah. Because tuning in this game isn't like, especially there's subtle differences that you can notice with the shocks, but it's not like not game breaking. I mean, if you're good at the game, putting on a different, or if you're bad at the game, putting on a different shock setup isn't going to magically make you the GOAT, But
Yeah.
it's interesting that that's a dynamic also in this game that wasn't a part of previous titles as much.
Right. A lot of the customization came into this game.
And I really do feel like in ATV4 you mentioned there's different vehicles and different things like that. Where in ATV 1 and 2 it was a lot more primitive. It was a lot more simple. You couldn't change the color of your rider, your ATV. It was definitely more simple. The physics were more simple. So I feel like this is the ATV franchise really hit its peak as far as just a straight up ATV game where everything's focused on ATVs. This is the peak game. This is my favorite one for me.
Right. And it still does focus a lot on ATV on 4, but it's a lot focused on MX. There's it to me.
Bikes, yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's like the first MX versus ATV, but with buggies and trucks as well.
Yep.
And so it's also a very interesting game.
Nice preload over that. Good job keeping it on the road there. I would probably hit that building.
Took that a
nice recovery there. Right there, you see he actually missed the first jump on the whoop section there and kind of was going to hit the brunt of that jump, but instead of hitting the brunt and then hitting another jump, he preloaded off the mistake and saved basically that section. Very nice. Obviously, as someone who's casually watching, you might not notice every little preload that he does, but it is very calculated to get the right amount of height and the right trajectory through the jump sections.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you can almost pretty much hit that little bump right there, back behind where I was, um, to not preload off of that or preload onto that. So you kind of want to miss that little part to the right, to where you can just hit that little left part and then just not preload and just go. So
And
two
beginning our final
13s,
lap.
very good. Almost a 212 actually. So
Very consistent too, considering how long of a track this is. You usually get, it's not like road circuits. Generally, your times are going to be more closer than a track where you have a bunch of jumps and a bunch of, momentum things, and you're stuck in an automatic transmission where you can put you in any gear at any time. Like, there's a lot of variables, so it's hard to get consistent laps in this game compared to your typical racing game. So for him to be doing that on such a long track is actually very impressive and very clutch as well, considering this is the last track of the run. Obviously, you don't want to end the run here, but
kind of choked up a bit of this lap so far. Not exactly the greatest, but you know, we're just trying to finish it out.
mm-hmm.
Um, by the way, Tone Dog, I'm sorry, we've been just talking this whole time. If you have any donations you need to read out, anything you'd like to say?
We do not have any donations, but let me remind you of the three charities that we are supporting. We are supporting the Trevor Project, Save the Children, and 350.org. The Trevor Project is a nonprofit organization that focuses on suicide prevention among the LGBTQ plus community. Save the Children focuses on improving the lives of children through better education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, as well as providing emergency aid in natural disasters and other conflicts. And 350.org is an international environmental organization addressing the climate crisis. Its stated goal is to end the use of fossil fuels and transition to renewable energy by building a global grassroots movement. So make sure to donate using the link below or using !donate. It would be very appreciated and goes to a good cause.
Thank you.
Yes.
It sounds like quite the wholesome initiative. Anybody in the chat, I urge you to go donate. I will be doing so myself after the conclusion of this run.
All right, 11:14, 11:14.26, and so I improved my world record by about a minute,
Wow.
right at a
There
minute.
you go. Sweet. Exactly a minute, right on the dot.
Pretty much. Um, RTA, I think I proved by like about a minute and a quarter, somewhere around there.
Gotcha. Sweet.
And so yeah. All right, I'm
Yep.
good to cut off my video.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was. I think we're pretty much just about at the same time that we were before, because we had a little bit of technical difficulties, and then I had 4 minutes of time saved there. So
So what's the play? Are we doing 4 or are we just gonna move on to the next one?
we're going to, yeah, and then maybe after that, I'll let you know if, well, at the moment we don't have any, we're not going to do 4 yet, but if Guff, if he destroys his PB, and his estimate, like it was like 20 28 minutes uh
Gotcha.
above. So if
I may have to sit that one out, bro, because I gotta wake up at like 6:30 in the morning.
mm,
So
all right, yeah,
maybe. I mean, you could see maybe last minute if you get like Ben or somebody you actually plays for, because I'm kind of probably the wrong person to have commentate for 4 and try my best, but.
Yep. So thank you for watching that run from Very Original with ATV Off-Road Fury 3. And the next run coming up will be Super Mario Galaxy by Guff.
All right,
Stick around.
I think we're good to go, dude.
All right.